Welcome to the final study guide for fall 2022. Know these, mostly to the terms, the crown, the voussoir, the keystone. That's it for these arch. All right, the arch. And know these basic architectural terms. The barrel vault, which has that rounded top, that was really created by the Romans. The groin vault, which is where two barrel vaults intersect with each other, and of course the dome with the oculus, the hole in the center of the dome, okay, to let in natural light. This is the patrician with the portraits of his ancestors. You'll need to know the title and know that it's from ancient Rome, okay? Even though this sculpture sports all of the Greek humanist sort of qualities with the contrapposto pose, and it looks completely realistic. The form of the body looks real, and three-dimensional and believable and human. This Romans tend to take it farther than rather than an ideal, which were the Greeks, where sculptures were about an ideal sort of idea of beauty and perfection of the human body. Romans were interested in truth, what we call verism or verity, okay? And so that's why the man looks like he really looked. He's got the folds and the wrinkles of age. His ancestors also sport their age and their fleshiness in the skin and everything. He's holding these portrait busts for a second reason. He's not only honoring them, but he also is saying, he's cementing his legitimacy to rule because he's building on his past ancestors' accomplishments. Okay? This gives him political cachet or sort of a name that can be built upon because of what his ancestors accomplished. All right? It's all about legitimacy. It's almost a propaganda sculpture. The four wall styles of Roman painting. The first style there is on the right. It's made to look like marble, faux marble, okay? The second style below, it's meant to look like a three-dimensional, like stage set that's in the wall, okay? That's with people in it. There's some sort of like action going on here in this Dionysian frieze, okay? The third style is on the upper left here. That's that sort of semi-monochromatic wall painting with the very delicate sort of linear embellishments on them that have sort of that, you know, very fanciful geometric designs and decoration. And on the right, we've got the fourth style, which has got sort of an amalgamation of all the styles, but it really looks like there's open windows. It's almost looks like a gallery space. There's little faux sculptures being painted in there and paintings, all kinds of things, okay? That's the fourth style. Know these terms from Byzantine and Western art in art, okay? Iconoclasm, that's that period of Byzantine where they destroyed all art images because you're not supposed to pray to graven images according to the second commandment in the Bible. The mandorla is that almond-shaped sort of frame that Christ, usually Christ, sits in either relief sculpture or in painting. Mosaics, of course, are those patterns and icons and pictures that are created with little pieces of gold or colored tesseract glass tiles, okay? Orants are any depiction of a person in an icon with their hands upraised, meaning they're praying, they're worshiping, okay? Looks like they're surrendering, but they're not. Christ the Pantocrator, that's that harsh judge. The depiction of Christ as the harsh judge of mankind. He always is carrying the Bible in his one hand, and on the right hand he's got it up in that sort of posture with one figure sort of standing up crooked, and he's got his hand, the rest of his hands closed, okay? That's him, you know, saying, I judge you. Okay, he's always got sort of a very long, sad face on, or at least stern looking, okay? This piece is a portrait of Justinian taking part, or actually leading, the communion rite, which was a religious service rite that's really usually the priest's job in the church, handing out the bread of Christ and the blood of Christ. That's really a priest's job. And he's actually staying in this piece, that he has the legitimacy of the right to rule because it's bestowed by God himself. He's almost made himself sort of equal to all those religious personages we see in this piece. We've got the abbot, the cardinal, we've got acolytes and other saints. We've got a picture on the shield of one of the saints here. We've got the Chi-Rho, which is the early Christian symbol for Christ, okay, based on the Greek word, the spelling of his name, okay. And they're all very flat looking, okay. They're meant to be, this image is meant to be decorative, instantly readable, and recognizable, as this is Justinian, okay. He's in the center hierarchical scale. He's in the center. He's a little bit the largest person in the piece. He's the most important. He's carrying the chalice that will be actually the bread of Christ will be held in that, okay? And he's actually legitimizing himself by saying his right to rule has been bestowed by a divine right by God, okay? And his people around him, they all tend to look somewhat flat and two-dimensional. The drapery on their clothing looks completely flat, doesn't seem to respond to their body. That's because we're in the age of faith. Deny the flesh to save the soul, and to be instantly readable and decorative. That's what these icons are also meant to do. Know that a penitive and a squinch were the two ways that the architects devised to make an easy and smooth and stable transition between a dome and the posts that create the wall and the arches, okay? Remember about Abbot Suger? There he is on my slide there. That's how you spell it. It's like sugar with an E. He is the man that is going to eventually, with his architect, they're going to step forward and say, we are ushering in the Gothic period of architecture. And the reason they're doing this is because they want to make it, going to the cathedral, a more spiritual experience. And ways to devise that are through height. The higher you are, the closer you are to God, and the presence of light and colored light in the church, in the space itself. And so when you walk in, you're bedazzled by the spiritual experience of the light and the height of the building. To create these very tall buildings, they had to do a couple of things architecturally. One was create and use from the the Islamic architects, the pointed arch, which allowed for more height and more strength and more elasticity, more possibilities of architecture, possibilities, that pointed arch. And also the flying buttress, which is that outside support that kept the walls standing up, because the walls were so tall and the stained glass was so heavy that without it, the walls could not stand. Here's the floor plan of a Roman Catholic, a Western Gothic cathedral. You'll just want to be able to know these terms. The largest area, of course, is the nave, and that's where all the parishioners or the people stand while they're waiting for communion or during service. Okay, that's the largest area. Here is a perfect example of Gothic architecture. This is Chartres in France, and you'll notice the flying buttresses on the exterior picture here. Very tall walls and loads of stained glass on the inside. Remember, this is supposed to be a spiritual experience. We're still talking about the age of faith. And for somebody living in a hovel outside of town, this would be completely mesmerizing and inspiring. Here's the aerial view of the Great Mosque. This is now a cathedral, of course, St. Catherine's. And here's the interior with the double arched or double tiered arch or double corbelled arch. All those terms are okay. That's meant to actually add height as well as give an extra chance for more of that patterning. Okay. Even though this piece was done around 1450, the Dark Ages, the Renaissance didn't happen instantly in 1400 or so, and then everybody went, oh yay, we're out of the Gothic, out of the Dark Ages. No, that wasn't it. In about 1350, Europe had its bout with the Black Death, its first experience, and it was going to continue in waves for over the next 200 plus years. They are estimating in Europe alone, over 75 to 200 million people died in that first bout, that first 2-year period of when the Black Death really came, the bubonic plague. So hence you see this type of fresco. Here we see the skeletons, which are arm in arm with all these different types of people. We've got the king here on the far right. In the middle is the queen. On the very back end is sort of a merchant. He's actually a wine or beer merchant. That's why he's carrying the cask and the little coin purse around his waist. But they're all arm in arm. And of course, the skeleton with the scythe, that's death. And the message of the piece is, we are all, from the day we're born, no matter who we are in the world, rich, poor, nobleman, or peasant, marching the dance of death, walking one step at a time, arm in arm with death, every day of our lives. So the other half of that message is, so you better get right with God. You better be prepared to make your maker. That's the message. And that sort of harsh doom and gloom message really would resonate after experiencing the Black Death, and with it coming back constantly every 10, 30, 50 years, whatever. Yeah. This piece is an early Gothic icon from about 1100 from Greece, and this is actually a telling of Lazarus being risen from the grave by Christ. He's got, Christ is, with the stigmata in his hand, has actually got a hold of Lazarus there, and he's coming out of the grave as he steps on death. That's what's represented here in the dark-skinned man with the green sort of covering on his nether regions. That's death that he's stomping on. And you'll notice the figures are all, the clothing on the figures, the drapery and the folds all look very flat and decorative. They don't even make any sense, really, as far as three-dimensional realism goes, okay? But it's not meant to. It's meant to instruct. We're supposed to instantly understand it, since nobody can read. We're supposed to understand the message about Christ overcoming death. And remember Lazarus, and remember himself rising, stamping out death. That's a Christian message. And it's also meant to be decorative. So that flatness, the rich color, the gold background, that's all meant to be those things. Beautiful, inspiring, and teaching. Okay? As opposed to Giotto's Christ raising the dead from the very early Renaissance, late Gothic period. Giotto is the transitional artist between the Gothic and the Renaissance. He is the beginner of what was to come with Da Vinci, Michelangelo, all of that. He lays the foundation. Look at this Lazarus raising from the dead, and notice the difference in how the humans are portrayed, how the space is. We're talking about an actual almost landscape here with the blue night sky, trees and rocks that look somewhat three-dimensional. The humans themselves, the drapery and folds of their fabrics actually look like they're responding to a three-dimensional realistic human body. We have different sexes and ages being portrayed here. There are people with facial hair, there are people without facial hair. We've got different ethnicities even. This is humanism beginning to come back again, but with a Christian message. He's still telling the story, but they're putting it in the real world. Because the Renaissance is really about the rebirth of humanism to a degree, but with a Christian influence.